Please help me with a very, very big round of applause here, guys. Let's make a lot of noise for Aaron Harris and Maya Ellinger. Over to you guys.
All right, hello, Fintech South. Afternoon day 2. Thank you all for sticking around for this last part of the day. And Aaron, thank you so much for taking the time here. We have a lot to discuss, talking about innovation for fintech in the SMB market. No small topic here. So I want to dive right in, but I want to start by talking about your customers. So Sage, you have millions of SMBs that come to you for a myriad of different reasons. Talk to me a little bit about when you're looking and when you're talking to your core customers, what are their big pain points here in 2025?
Yeah, great question. So, I mean, that's one of the great things about having a role in such a global business is these millions of customers they're all over the world. A lot of them are in North America, they're in Europe, we're across the Middle East and South Africa. And if I were to characterize, the one feeling or trend that unifies all these millions of customers is kind of a heightened state of anxiety. Businesses and finance leaders are being asked to do more with less, where the implications of failure are greater than they've ever been. Supply chains are not as resilient as they used to be. A lot of companies are having to re-engineer their supply chains in the midst of a lot of uncertainty. Small businesses in particular are really being impacted by the cost of credit and how hard it is to access credit. And so, loads and loads of anxiety being felt across all these millions of businesses. And, one of the key underpins in the feedback that we get from them is that, whereas maybe a couple of years ago, there was hope amongst these SMBs that AI would help them to do more with less, there's now a real expectation, right? So there's a real responsibility for companies like Sage to bring this AI to bear.
Talk to me a little bit about how your products, particularly on the AI side, how have they evolved and developed in the recent, in the near term here, particularly when it comes to the needs of your customers around those AI services?
Yep. So we set out our AI vision about 7 years ago. If you go back 7 years ago, AI was just starting to hit the mainstream with some tasks that it was now useful for, like reading data off of a document, maybe classifying a transaction, looking for an anomaly or an exception. And this was kind of an inflection point in the way the accounting profession and small businesses were reacting to technology. So we had to lay out this vision. And the vision is a pretty consistent approach that we've taken over the years to investments. And it's essentially 3 things. So the first is SMBs want automation, right? They want us to apply AI to automating all the back office functions, invoicing their customers, paying their vendors, reconciling their accounts, getting financial statements issued. They also want, paired with that, confidence that they're compliant, that the data that they're using to make decisions is accurate, that they're not becoming victims of fraud or suffering from clerical errors, right? There's an equal need for that confidence associated with that automation. And then the last thing is that they don't want to have to go looking for insights. They want those insights to be proactively surfaced and brought to people who can make decisions. So if you go back 7 years ago, we were building AI that could do these very specific things, like read a total on an invoice, figure out if maybe a journal entry had been coded incorrectly. And these were tightly embedded within our products in such a way that it wasn't always obvious that you were using AI. But as you fast forward a few years, especially with large language models now becoming a part of our repertoire of tools that we can use, that AI, which was sort of passive and embedded within workflows, is now interactive, right? Now customers can interact with this technology. They can ask it to do things. They can ask questions. They can get responses. And that's now led us to the wave that we're in currently that we call the agentic wave. And this is the most exciting wave. We've taken all of this advance, and with the power of AI that can now reason, that has a broader understanding of the world and certainly of the businesses that we deploy it to, these once static workflows that only could follow one linear path, right, that required a lot of supervision, they're now able to run with more autonomy. They can make decisions when things sort of don't follow the standard path. They can involve humans when there's an exception that needs a review. And so the way I would characterize it as, the vision, the expectation hasn't changed. It's been about automation, it's about assurance, it's about insights. The way it's delivered is where the real progression is, from static, hard-coded workflows to now AI that's capable of taking ownership of these workflows and making a lot of decisions without close supervision.
I'm interested in that. If we can kind of dive in on the agentic side, what does that look like for your customers? Maybe there's an example you can point to on how someone's using an agentic workflow right now.
Yeah, so I think there's a lot of hype going on about AI, and particularly agentic AI right now. And there's a lot of companies that are trying to sort of take ownership of the definitions and the stories around this. The one thing that I want to be super clear is that agentic AI is disruptive enough that the vendors who are building it can't go on the journey without customers. Right, so when you ask me that question, what is the experience like for that user who's using an agentic AI, the honest answer is we're figuring it out. It's really interesting when you, as a software developer, make that transition from traditional software development where you're writing code that has a very specific outcome. If there's a bug, it's in your logic, right? It's not in the technology. Moving into this world of large language models and generative AI, where you're not coding anymore every outcome, it's a bit unpredictable. You have to change fundamentally the way you build and deliver that software, and it requires you to partner with your customers. So I know I'm not asking your direct question, right? But I'm going to get to it. But it's really, really critical to partner with your customers on this evolved experience where the outcomes aren't hard-coded anymore. And so what we're figuring out is what is the interaction between the user and the technology where that trust is maintained. I had an interaction with a small business a few years ago. We were just kind of coming out of COVID. I called this, it was literally a mom and pop shop in England. There was a garden paving stone store. The husband ran the retail side of the business. The wife did the bookkeeping in the back, and they were unhappy with something that happened with one of our products. And so as CTOs of large companies do, I called the small business, right? Because I wanted to learn more and get to know this customer. And through that conversation, we started to talk about reconciling her bank accounts, and she was really frustrated with that process. And so I asked her, are you using our AI-powered bank reconciliation? She said, no, I don't trust it. And it wasn't a matter of data privacy, data security. It wasn't a matter of some of the the social risks of AI. It was simply that if she made a mistake with the bank reconciliation, it could cause them to miss payroll, right? It could cause them to make mistakes with the way they pay their vendors. It was simply too important for her to let go. So as we bring in agentic AI, that is where the promise is you can let go. We have to get this experience right. So getting back to your question, here's an example. So we use AI today to process invoices, right? You read the data, you categorize the data, you make decisions about the best way to pay the vendor. We can even use AI to match the invoice to a purchase order, all of this within a very strict workflow. With agents, we can now say to one large model, you now own this process end to end. And so the user in this case is actually giving instructions. Pay these types of vendors first. Let me know if the projected cash outlays exceeds this amount. Use your judgment to reach out to me if something looks funny. Reach out to the owners of purchase requisitions if you've got a question about a purchase order. In other words, the AI now can make decisions and it can reason as it goes through the process. And given the right tools, it can include other people, right? It can look into data beyond its current purview. And the result is we finally make this switch from AI that's incrementally improving process to AI that's taking ownership of the process. But as I say, and I'll keep saying this, that can't happen until we get that trust relationship right between the user and the technology.
I love the example you brought up about the small business in the UK. I want to talk a little bit more about Sage's presence here in Atlanta. If people haven't been to the new office, it's a great location, right in the heart of the city. Yep. And when I was there, what struck me was that yes, you have the office where your employees are coming and working, but you also have this space designed intentionally to bring your customers in, and I believe you call it a genius bar. Yep. For style experience for your customers. Why was it important to make sure that your new office kind of really incorporated your customers, and kind of how does that impact your innovation moving forward?
Yeah, great question. So if you're interested, the new office is at Ponce City Market. Yeah. It's a new all timber construction building. It's a really, really beautiful space. I think we got some PR, maybe unwanted, about how much we spent on it. It may have seemed a little bit exorbitant. And this is our North America headquarters, and we've devoted half the space to customers. And there's a real reason for that probably is a continuation of the last conversation that I just had with you about the importance of taking customers on the journey with you. So it's really, really critical when you're building new solutions using new technology and you're trying to innovate, to not just hire a marketing firm to go out and survey 1,000 customers, ask them 10 questions, collate all the answers, and come back with, here's the insights and the themes. Don't get me wrong, there's a lot of value in that, but there's an equal value, if not more value, in sitting down with a customer, hearing the pain in their voice. I described it to somebody the other day, and it's a terrible analogy, but you almost want to be on the front lines hearing the bullets whiz past your head. Right? There's a real passion and a sense of urgency and anxiety that you get when you sit with customers, and it drives more energy into the innovation process. And you get that opportunity to go past those 10 questions that a marketing firm would have talked to 1,000 companies about. You can ask the next why and the next why, and get into, what is the real source pain, and how do you fundamentally go about solving that in a different way? So I'll tell you another story here. Accounting software has been around for decades. The accounting profession's been around for centuries. It's a bit sclerotic, right? Things are done the same way as they've always been done. There's always been a monthly close, right? That's just how the profession works. In accounting products, there had always been, for more sophisticated accounting products, there had always been a 13-month calendar. And if you go back, to the early days of Intact, which is a company that I co-founded that we then sold to Sage, we started to get pressure about 20 years ago from businesses wanting a 13th month. And this was just standard, like every accounting product has it. Typically, December 31st, one day is a 13th month. Right? And there's something wrong with your product if you don't have that. If you don't actually sit down with a customer and have this conversation, you don't understand what's really behind that 13th month, and it doesn't lead to a more constructive conversation. So it turns out that a lot of businesses have year-end activity and year-end adjustments that they don't want to put into December because it distorts the view of December's performance versus the rest of the year. And so what they literally do is they close the books on December 30th, and then they put a whole bunch of special transactions into December 31st to preserve, the continuity. And so from that, we came up with a whole new approach to accounting that gave them a different set of books to do their adjustments, right? And their year-end, sort of exceptional activity. That doesn't happen through these big surveys. It happens when you sit down and you ask why, and you ask why, and you ask why, and then you take them along with you on the journey. You show them what you want to build. You show them, well, here's how it might work. Here's how the other problems that may solve. So long answer to a short question, but this beautiful new customer discovery center that we've built is intended to drive those kinds of conversations.
I love that tangible example of the 13th month. That's very cool. We've talked a lot about AI. The other big buzzword that we can't not talk about is open banking. We've heard it throughout the last few days here at Fintech South. But I want to hear from you. Do you see any untapped potential or opportunities within open banking specifically for the SMB market?
Yeah, so the opportunities are enormous. And I'm actually glad to get a chance to talk about this because my conversation over the last 2 years has been like 99% about AI. And I'm having to remind people that at least half of what we have to do for SMBs is to push them along their digital transformation journey. AI doesn't work very well when it doesn't have digital systems to work on, right? They're equally important in my mind in delivering this future that we want to deliver for businesses. So the way that I think about open banking is that it's really one element within a broader set of standards that are emerging that are intended to drive digital flows of information between SMBs and their trading partners. In this case, it's banks, right? But it also might be their customers, their vendors, payment processors, their accountants, governments in particular is a really important trading partner. So if you go back about 5 years ago, when the UK government, in this case, was really starting to push some of these standards, with open banking being the most important, they did a bunch of research about the impact they could have on SMBs. And one of their discoveries was that small businesses were missing out on about $28 billion in access to credit because they simply could not go through the process of extracting their data, formatting it into the standards-based way that banks want it, taking that to the bank, going through the process of applying for a loan. So, it was worse than that, right? It was $28 billion of unaccessed credit. But for those SMBs that actually got credit, most of them stopped after the first bank, right? As soon as they got someone to say yes, right? There was so much work that went into it that they, I'll take it. This is just one example of the challenges of SMBs not having sort of free access to their data, not having the technology to drive sort of standards-based workflows. And so the real opportunity for open banking, and this is true for open finance, which is coming later in the US probably, but it's starting to emerge in other parts of the world. E-invoicing, especially in Europe right now, is a huge enabler of digital workflows. What they do is they create free-flowing marketplaces, right? So whether it's access to credit, whether it's access to other business services that depend on sort of a standards-based understanding of your data, these standards enable access to these markets, but importantly, they disproportionately benefit smaller businesses, right? Who don't have the same capabilities to access the markets as the larger businesses do. So we're obviously huge proponents of open banking. I do want to point out, I had a conversation in the green room with a gentleman before here. Well, shouldn't banks get paid on this? Absolutely. So, what is happening through things like open banking, open finance, e-invoicing, is they're creating new business models, right? They're creating new ways to commercially benefit from this flow of data, and so banks should benefit the same way that SMBs do, right? We all just need to embrace this new world of free-flowing standards-based data.
Okay, interesting. now, correct me, you've been in the CTO seat for 6 years, is that right? Tell me a little bit about how your role as a CTO has changed in that time. You mentioned AI has been part of Sage for 7 years, but what has kind of your day-to-day or kind of your overall thesis as CTO, how has that evolved?
I do a lot more of this than I used to. Seriously, when you talk to SMBs about adopting AI, the biggest barrier to adoption is trust. And when you dig a little deeper, the biggest signal of trust is the company behind it. And so a really critical part of my job is getting out there and establishing Sage as a trusted company. If you go to our website, you'll find videos of me talking about our trust commitments when it comes to AI. It's really kind of ironic because Sage is a 44-year-old company. When I first took the job as CTO, when I would go out externally, I was trying to build Sage's reputation as an innovator. I wanted to really represent all the amazing things that we were doing as an innovative software developer, which was absolutely true and continues to be true, and in fact is more true than ever now. But what's interesting is that our 44-year history, our kind of reputation as being the adult in the room when it comes to building accounting software, but maybe being a bit more conservative, maybe we're taking a little bit more time to get things done right and getting them out in a way that people trust, that's now actually turning into a big advantage for us. And so a big part of the change in my job is getting out there and telling this story of who we are and why you should trust us, right? It's a really big part of selling this kind of technology. The other part of my job is really the world of technology is moving faster and faster and faster. It used to be that as the CTO, I was 2 or 3 years ahead of the product development teams. I could get out there and tell these really exciting, provocative stories about where technology could take us. That time is getting compressed, right? I'm barely 6 months ahead of our product teams now. They're building the stuff today that I'm out there talking about. So that's the other part of my job that's really changed is the future is 6 months away now. It's not 3 years away. I'm sort of constantly talking to our developers, our data scientists. I'm getting more plugged in to other technology companies and especially the startup world because I'm a bit desperate to stay ahead. It's just getting harder and harder and harder. It's incredibly exciting to be a CTO in this era, but also incredibly challenging because things are moving so fast.
In the last couple of minutes we have, I want to talk about the technology team at Sage. Where are the kind of growth opportunities that you're seeing from your team perspective? Are you bringing on new talent, and kind of where in the team is kind of growth coming from?
Well, I mean, this is a good plug for Atlanta. We very deliberately chose Atlanta as our North America headquarters. We've made a decision to prioritize hiring in Atlanta. We love Atlanta for a couple of reasons. The first is that it is a great fintech hub, right? There's so much talent here in Atlanta, but we also love the diversity here in Atlanta. We do feel pretty strongly that if we're going to build AI and that AI needs to replicate human decision making, then the people developing it should sort of represent the broadest scope of humanity, right? And so we think we can tap into the diversity of that we need here in Atlanta. So we love being able to hire out of the universities here. What are we looking for? We are hiring data scientists, we're hiring AI engineers, full stack developers, and we will hire as many of them as we possibly can here. Where else are we focused? Newcastle, England. If you've not heard of it, Newcastle Brown Ale, maybe better known, Stings from Newcastle. That's our global headquarters. We've got about 2,000 people up there. We do a lot of hiring in Newcastle, and then Barcelona. I don't know if you care, but Barcelona is another great hub for us. It tends to be a global center. It draws talent from around the world. So it's another place for us to tap into a diverse workforce.
Excellent. Well, I think a good plug for people in the audience here in Atlanta that there's opportunities with Sage in town. I so appreciate your time, Aaron, and thank you to everyone in the audience who stayed with us through the entirety of the day, and we look forward to talking more after.
Yep, thank you.